Yes, good morning still. Welcome to Heaven or Hollywood Iron Man NUI. Is it good UX or is it just FUI? Who am I? Well, my name is A Randell. I'm a partner with MCW Technologies. We're a small consultancy out of the United States that focuses on Microsoft technology primarily. I'm a Microsoft MVP for ALM, which is Application Lifecycle Management. And that basically means I spend a lot of time helping people manage the overall process for software development, regardless of platform. That said, I am focused on the Microsoft stack. I'm a member of Pluralsight's technical staff. I'm currently working on a course for Visual Studio Online, and I recently co-authored Professional Application Lifecycle Management for Visual Studio 2013 from Rocks. That, according to my co-authors, hit the streets yesterday, so it's available now if you want to go order from Amazon or your favorite bookseller. Contact information at the bottom. I will be posting my slides as a PDF as well as links to the videos I'm going to show you. This is how you can get a hold of me if you have any questions. Let's break down the title. Right? There are a few things in there that, depending upon your choices, you might just come in to say, oh, this looks like a fun talk to go to, I'll pick this. So we're going to break down the four big things: Iron Man, NUI, FUI, and then good UX. So of course, when we're talking about Iron Man in this context, user experience, I'm referring to the major motion pictures that are available now to watch at home, if you haven't seen them already. Has everybody at least seen one of these? Okay, good. You're the right audience. This is a geek talk. It's very focused on that. That said, there have been three major releases, but we're going to focus mostly on things that were shown in Iron Man 2. Iron Man 2 had a wide range of user experience items that were worth breaking down and talking about, particularly because a lot of them are possible today. Not all of them, but a lot are. And so one of the things we're going to do in this talk is I'm going to deconstruct some of the scenes and talk about what's good and bad about the user experience. Now that said, one of the key things about Iron Man is it makes heavy use of NUI, Natural User Interface. There's a couple of quotes there that I took from Wikipedia. But basically, the idea behind NUI is that the interface that we interact with is effectively invisible. It's something that is not generally in our actual space. It's something that responds to voice commands, gesture, and then there's touch. Touch is interesting because on one hand, it is a tactile response, and thus the interface is a part of the experience. On the other hand, it's not the experience. My keyboard I am touching, but no one considers a keyboard a touch interface, right? It's a mechanical interface. So that's one of the distinctions we're making here is, generally when we talk about NUI, we're talking about that. That said, a critical component of NUI is our eyes. How we process the input we get. So it actually goes beyond just what we often consider the specialized NUI areas to just standard computer interfaces, what's on the screen. And what is a good NUI experience both visually as well as gesturally, vocally, and tactily. Now, I mentioned the major ones, touch, voice, and gesture. Wearable is also becoming a new type of NUI, particularly when you think about having a device that's able to gather health information about you, right? Or to interact with you through eye motion. A couple examples are, Google has an upcoming watch. We have various health devices like Fitbit that will track your heartbeat, your pace, and everything else. Google Glass has a prototype feature that allows you to just move your head and have it cause the device to respond. All those things are different ways of interacting with technology. And if we think back to the beginning of Hollywood's first foray into this in science fiction, one of my favorites being Star Trek, right? Devices like our iPads and other tablet devices was pure science fiction in the 60s, right? You can go through Doctor Who and see all sorts of things. Now, sonic screwdrivers, haven't seen anything as awesome as that yet. But fundamentally, right, things we've seen out of the science fiction community are becoming day-to-day reality. Honestly, if you transported someone from the 60s or 50s to today, they would be freaking out, right? There's so many things that were pure science fiction that we take for granted. Now, FUI is a common acronym for fantasy user interface. It's what we see on the big screen. When we think about fantasy interface, it's all about entertainment, right? And the key thing to understand about that is that there's obviously artistic license for the story, but also, surprisingly for a lot of people, is the choices made in the user interface, sometimes we will even criticize as dumb, or it would never be done that way, or that looks horrible, is done so that the people in the cinema looking on a screen can actually see what is going on, right? How many of you program at probably 10 or 12 point on your screen? Anybody? Smaller? Okay. Some of us are getting older, I have to go bigger. But fundamentally, even if you start thinking about 14, 16 point type, if that is taken from a shot, for example, with a camera like in the back of the room, over the shoulder of a person at the computer screen, it's illegible, right? So there has to be artistic license taken just so people can see what's going on. Now, granted, we always love when they break encryption with 3 keystrokes and flip of the wrist, but fundamentally, right, we have to understand that there is this fantasy element that we have to take in context when we evaluate it. And that's probably one of the last things I want to point out about the FUI part is, just because they do it doesn't mean we should use it, right? We have to be able to make sure that we understand what we're doing in the context of our audience. The audience in a movie is all about entertainment, right? Now, when we think about good user experience, UX, right, there's a whole sub-industry on this. And my day-to-day is ALM, but I have a deep passion for user experience. And when we think about this, we start thinking about some fundamental issues. And like I said, there's a bunch of other resources you can take a look at. I'll post some links to it. But here are a couple key points, particularly when we think about NUI and this Iron Man style technology. And the first one is simple and natural dialogue. If you watch the movies, and particularly if you watch the scenes I'm going to show you with the real audio from the movie, you'll see that the character played by Robert Downey Jr., Tony Stark, is talking in natural conversational terms to his computer, to his agent, Jarvis, right? He's just talking to it. He talks to other machines in his workshop with the expectation that they will understand just like a human, right? That is the sheer definition of a pure NUI experience. You're not fighting the experience. It's natural, it flows, it works. Another key point about good user experience is to give feedback, right? To not let the human beat themselves to a bloody pulp when the computer doesn't do what they want, right? And we've seen this. And probably the other thing that stops us from throwing these things out the window is because they are so bloody expensive, right? And granted, I've seen people do horrible things to computers out of rage, right? It just happens. My wife, I wonder some days if she really is going to take her computer and throw it out the window. And so what we need to do is give feedback as often as necessary. The key word is necessary. It's understanding the user, right? Nothing worse to a user, though, is when they click the button and nothing appears to happen, right? So sometimes it's all about telling them what's going on. The other thing is to support recall and minimize memory leak. I'm getting old. My brain does not process like it used to. I used to be able to keep so much up here in meat space. And granted, I blame the device to some degree, right? I've become dependent. It's easier just to use this than it is to remember the phone numbers, to remember email addresses, and other mechanisms we use to get through our day-to-day. I mean, how many of you have used a physical map book in years, right? We've gone to the phone. To where now, how do I get somewhere? Oh, let me look it up. Because you might not be able to remember the streets without looking it up. You may know visually, but if you had to translate that to someone else by providing them with information, you might not be able to do it. So what we want to do whenever there's a natural user experience, we want to think about minimizing the impact. One of the things we were discussing before this session was voice recognition, Xbox One. One of the things that frustrates me about it is that I don't know all the commands. In other words, it doesn't do all the things I think it should do. Most notably was turning it off. I thought turning the Xbox off would be good enough. Turns out it's not. The other thing is there's a missing command for eject. You can't tell it to eject a Blu-ray. And I'm thinking, well, that's stupid. Why do I have to walk? I want to just walk up and grab it. I don't want to have to find the button on this nice, slick, polished interface. So it's those kind of things that you have to think about that are very simple, yet as a programmer, you might have to really think about it. And I'm curious, how many of you consider your number one software programming is your primary trade? Okay? Who considers themselves a designer? Okay. So most of you are programmers. And by the way, I have a second talk tomorrow where we're primarily focused on programming Connect and showing you how to do voice, gesture, and camera recognition. So ultimately it comes down to good UX, right? There's no one perfect mechanism, right? In fact, Microsoft and Apple have been showing different ways that we might present touch interfaces. Microsoft has their technology formerly known as Metro, and then Apple just has their standard iOS design guidelines. And if you look at iOS 7.1 and even compare it to the original iOS, you can see the evolution and what they've decided is a better experience. The key is build, measure, and learn, right? It's that iterative cycle of getting feedback and not being stuck in one design, right? Neither Apple or Microsoft is 100% right or wrong. It's about the total experience that you're trying to build. But before I go much further, Vader has decided that he will take control. We have to be careful when we start building systems, particularly when we start taking advantage of new technologies and techniques, NUI included, in that it can be used for evil. Anybody remember this in the early days of the internet? Or how about Internet Explorer's contribution to the great tags? Wonderful. There's a tendency to sometimes overuse new technologies and techniques, so you have to be careful. The problem is sometimes we can go too far. We can try and be perfect and good. There's a number of people that have written about usability, and sometimes they get caught up on certain pieces of data to the point they're not willing to try something new. They're not willing to experiment. They'll say, this is the way it is, and this is the way it shall be, right? UI guidelines, particularly in corporate environments, can be frustrating and limiting to the ability to enhance or to change. So we've got to kind of find something in the middle, because at the end of the day, we really want to be a little Han and Chewie, right? I mean, they're not perfect, right? But they're not, necessarily evil, right? They do some crazy things occasionally. The first Star Wars, one of my favorite scenes is when Han and Chewie start chasing after the stormtroopers. But then they get to a point where they go, wait a minute, I think we're doing this wrong. Let's re-step, and they turn around the other way. And so when we think about building new experiences for our users, it's about these incremental steps where we're willing to change, where we're not all good, we're not all evil. Now, I actually had a video that I went by that I want to play first.
So this is a great idea for a website. We got a spinning logo or a flaming logo.
You know what would be a great idea? If people with PCs anywhere could order their products, and that was all tied together, inventory, billing, vendors, the works, then that would change everything.
I don't know how to do that.
Now, that commercial is from the late 90s. I don't know if it made it over to the UK, but it ran on television in the US. And it was IBM saying, we know how to do this. And I had real encounters with this in that the company I worked at was hired to help a print company. They had their designers build this great website for them. But it couldn't talk to their production process because the designers didn't know how to do that. And that's the key thing to understand about this, is that this is a partnership. You may not know all the great UX technology techniques. You might not have studied color theory, right? You may not have studied space design and layout. But it is ultimately a partnership to make things happen, right? We don't want to go one way or the other. We don't want completely boring, yet we don't want necessarily pretty for pretty's sake. So the reason you're here, hopefully, is you want to build better user experiences, right? You want things that are better looking, right? That are better functioning, ultimately, and possibly even better feeling, right? I know people that are emotionally attached to their devices, right? I mean, I live on this. My wife, I know, if I took her phone, she would hurt me, right? It's real simple. Her life is on there. She has everything she needs there, and it connects to everything else she needs out there on the web. And so there is this emotional attachment we want people to have to the systems we build. Because ultimately it's about making people's lives better. Now hopefully users want you here because they want a quality experience. So QX is something I came up with a couple years ago. I was actually having dinner with some friends down in Australia, and it was just, we started talking about what's right and what's wrong about software and how we're evolving and how things are changing. And I broke down QX into 4 things. The first thing is that a user wants an intuitive interface, right? If I have to think too hard about it, it's not natural, right? I mean, this is the thing, I go back to the Xbox One. The command sequence is not completely natural. A lot of things are. Some things just work, and you're just like, wow, that's awesome. And my son, who is 10, has picked up a lot of it right away. There's no training, there's no me telling him how to do it. He's just figured it out. Right? That's a good sign of a natural interface, or any computer interface. Right? We've seen with young children how touch is natural. How once you give them a little access to things like an iPad or any other type of good tablet, they'll immediately start touching. It's where there's videos on the internet of children trying to swipe and touch magazines because they expect that gestural experience. Right? Especially if you think about something in 2D space as opposed to 3-dimensional space. So intuitive is a key thing. Available, right? There's nothing worse than being told you can't use something, right? The system's down. My wife goes bonkers when she sits down to pay the bills, and she'll go to one of the websites and it'll say, we're down for maintenance. Just absolutely bonkers, right? In the modern era, there's really no excuse for that, right? We have ways to build redundant systems and have things available and to service things. You know, DevOps, continuous deployment, are modern things we're talking about. We shouldn't be going to this service window where, sorry, you can't do anything for 8 hours because we're busy doing something from back end. Fast, right? Our tolerance for lack of speed is really low, right? We want it yesterday. Obviously, we're facing some challenges there, but we're getting better when it comes to both the power of the machines, but also the power of the network. Right? Fundamentally, we're still limited by the speed of light. Right? But we are to the point where there's this expectation that I can get results and I can get them quickly. You know, the amount of time that Google spends on search with these large, clusters and arrays of machines is amazing. Right? So you're getting these responses as you type. Right? And that's compelling stuff. And ultimately, we want it connected. I have some more things on this towards the end. But at the end of the day, I expect the data to be here, and here, and everywhere else I need it. Right? The idea that data only lives in one place that is siloed is an anachronism in the modern era. Right? Sadly, a lot of us probably still work on systems where it is that way, where you have these complete silos where you can only get to it if you run this program, or you use this data entry screen, or do this. Right? But the things are changing, right? Your contacts, right, can be in 30 different places, including the SA database. Now, ultimately, then why should you care? This isn't the reason you care, right? This is often how developers will perceive the consumers of their technology, the things we build, right? Nameless, faceless people, right? Another brick in the wall, to quote Pink Floyd, right? That's not it. What you need to do is step down and find your empathy, your family. It's my grandmother, God love her, 85 years old, still can use a computer. Your friends, right? I'm sure many of us get that phone call. Hey man, can you come help me out here? I'm having trouble with my computer, right? It's having that empathy for other users that should drive your design choices when it comes to the experience. And it's not always what they see or what they touch, it's the entire back-end experience. The choices you make when you build a program, you put up a modal dialogue, right? That's the thing that frustrates a user. And ultimately, it's you, right? Think about how you want to deal with it. We consume as much as we create, if not more. Therefore, it's our responsibility to lead the change to these better experiences from top to bottom. Now, I'm going to play a video. It's about 12 minutes. And this is selections from Iron Man 2. And then we're going to go through and break them down into some major components and talk about what's available today and what's good and what's bad. Now, interestingly enough, the music is actually from Tron. The person who made the video and posted it on YouTube did save me a lot of work. They do a video editing, but have a look at this. This is one of the things I always find interesting is as you start seeing the layered approach on how the scenes actually composited together. It's a little disappointing because that's hoping there wasn't a lab like that. is where the real action takes place. None of that's around him, right? He's having to pretend it's all there. And then they have to map that to his gestures. Some of these scenes were outtakes or deleted scenes that weren't used. Of course, you gotta have your IP addresses. So there's a bit more to it, particularly some of the handheld stuff, but they have a lot of stuff that we've seen already. It's very subtle, and they're showing some of the progressions of the design. So what it is, this is showing some of the key things there. We have a lot of different pieces. So let's go break them down into different units and talk about what's good, what's bad, and what can we use. When we think about some of the Iron Man UX themes that we had there, the first is rich handheld devices. We didn't see much of it in the video, but you saw some at the beginning, and then there's some pictures I'm going to show you in a second. Intelligent touch surfaces, right? There's the one point where he's sitting next to Pepper Potts and he goes over to get information about the character played by Scarlett Johansson, right? He's just touching what appears to be a normal coffee table, all of a sudden it lights up. It's electromagnetic glass that knows how to respond, visualize, and show stuff, right? And then it even has multi-touch at one point where he resizes the image, just like you do on your iPad or other touch device. Then we have holograms, right? Extensive use of that. Definitely a lot of it seems like science fiction, but the crazy thing is there's stuff out there now. We're getting there, which is pretty amazing. The problem is cost, complexity of setup, what you need to do. But then you think about $1 billion organization like Stark Industries, you start thinking about the companies out there, the money that governments have, well then you start thinking about maybe it's not completely impossible. Gesture-driven interactions, we're definitely getting there. Connect is the primary example, and I'll show this tomorrow. And even the new version of Connect is even better at being able to recognize things down to the digit level, right? That type of interaction where you see him doing stuff in space is possible. Now the problem is I can do this right here. This is what it is. I'm seeing nothing. Adding the hologram experience, that's going to be the whole next level. And ultimately, though, it comes down to connected systems. If you think about what goes on, what drives everything, when Robert Downey Jr. speaks, he's talking to something manifested in the form of Jarvis, the agent, which is ultimately backed by what? Huge computer systems, right? We start thinking about Siri, Microsoft's upcoming Cortana, Google's Google Play. You think they would come with some geeky name too? Google Play, okay. But in either case, those are the things, and let's talk about how they work. So let's start with handheld. So the first thing that's interesting about this to me, and this is a common thing we're going to see in a couple other places, is the use of what appears to be a piece of glass, representing the handheld device, right? So definitely there's a bit of stylistic and artistic license there to use that as a display mechanism, because where's the guts, right? Where's the magic? How does it work? But at the same time, there's something said for this design thing, because you're going to see it in the two other videos I'm going to show you that are not from movies. So that's a little interesting. But this idea that I can have this display. Then there's this next part where this device becomes the platform for displaying a hologram that I can then interact with in 3D space. I think it'd be really cool. How useful, I don't know, right? It depends on how good it is. If it's this smooth and fluid, sure. But I think we're going to have a period of time when it's going to suck, to be all honest. Then there's a scene that you didn't see in the video, but it's earlier in the movie where he's in the Senate chamber testifying about Iron Man, and he takes what appears to be his phone, and his phone then he turns it into a control device to take over the video projection systems inside the Senate chambers. So on one hand, that's perfectly reasonable. Now the design, once again, is leaning towards the fake, in that it looks like this very thin device that's even thinner than if I take out the case on my iPhone, to the point of almost being translucent. But this one is a little more realistic, at least it has a frame, right? And it has what appears to be a normal computer program, where it's actually showing things for him and he's able to touch and do things. It's just amazing that, of course, you can walk into any room and then it knows all sorts of great things, right? So again, some artistic license, but definitely no reason why we couldn't build something like this today. Now this one is really subtle when you see what he's doing, in that he's, first of all, once again, we've now turned it back into a completely translucent frame, or a solid frame around a translucent piece of glass that has his program that then he's saying, I want to take what's here, and by pointing it, it's able to use perception and depth to figure out, oh, there's a projection over there, I'm going to transfer it and move it over there. Right? Very much that Minority Report, that sliding gesture movement, where he's tapping, and if you watch the movie, you'll see he taps and you get this glow, they do this glow of light, then all of a sudden it's on the projection screen. I think we're still a bit away from that, but once again, you start breaking it down into the mathematical things that need to happen, a lot of it's there, right? We have tons of location data, right? The ability to have a gyroscope in here, tap force, projection, there's all sorts of things to do. Now the question is, how does it know to be able to take over some random projector like that device is not, the episode is not responding, but you get the idea. Now, these are screenshots from an app that you can get on your iPhone, and I believe it's also available on Android, called the Iron Man 3 application. And if you fire it up and bring it up, you'll see it starts up and does all sorts of wonderful things like okay, so they got the actor to record voice tones and stuff, and they built this kind of cool user experience, right? And I think that's one thing that's interesting about, if you take a look at some of these handheld sequences, is there's a lot of attention to detail played onto the coloring and the style of the UX widgets, right? Now, in some cases, right, this is just fluff, right? It doesn't do anything. It makes visual animation when the person talks. But is it all fluff? Because remember we talked about this feedback mechanism, right? Letting the user know you're doing something. Sometimes those little animations are just that. I'm alive, I'm here, I'm working, I'm doing something, okay? Particularly when we want a combination of that voice response, yes, I got it, because maybe I can't look at it, maybe I'm touching, or the opposite is I don't want audio, right? I'm in a quiet meeting room and you're setting an appointment to not go to my talk tomorrow, or whatever, to talk tomorrow, right? And you don't want any vocal response. Right? Those are all subtle things that are presented here. This is all hoo-ha, right? Just the power level showing up. Once again, it's that little other extra bit of warm feeling that you know what's going on. So the question is, are we there yet? Well, when you think about handheld devices, when we think about our phones, when we think about them as a gateway to a larger system, the cloud, yeah, we're really getting there. Right? There's amazing things we can do here. What's funny is if you watch the movie, there's actually a product placement for the Oracle Grid. Right? And in fact, I don't know if you guys noticed in one of the video sequences when they show the Starting Expo at the bottom, there's Kodak, LG, right? Nice little product placement at the bottom. But, you know, it right there brings it together, which is Jarvis points out that, hey, I'm going to go tap into this ethereal cloud thing that's going to make it possible for me to trace this call. Right? And I'll show you a screenshot of that in a bit. And so when we think about remote device control takeover, well, Apple has a bunch of new things in the latest iOS for AirPlay, and I forgot the word of it, there's the one for the beacons, right? So you start thinking about the fact of being able to go up this to a projector and tell it to project this is not completely far-fetched. Yes, a dumb projector that we know has to work because it's connected to the cable, but a network-capable projector, think about network-capable TVs, right? I can do AirPlay. If I already got on my Mac, I can do AirPlay from this to my Mac, and from my Mac to a TV, assuming it has the right device to listen. So even that scene, while obviously how executed is a bit far-fetched, is completely possible. Right? So we're getting a high level of we are there yet. And finally, with the personal assistant, right? Siri keeps getting better. Right? And Microsoft has a new that will most likely be announced this week if the rumor mill is accurate. Be announcing their Cortana digital assistant, which is based upon a character from the Halo franchise, which will serve the same purpose as Siri, which is you can issue voice commands in natural language and have it responded to. The key to both Google's, I didn't list Google here on this slide, but the key to all three of these is that they're backed by big cloud infrastructures, right? So there's a system behind making this happen. This is just a gateway device to the experience. But if you take a look at the scenes from the movie, none of it's really that far-fetched. There's a few things that, yeah, there's artistic license, and yes, there's some design nuances here, but even look at this. Compare to the phones of the 80s, right? The cell phones of the 80s, right? Those big, giant bricks. And look at you have today. You have a computer that's more powerful than my first desktop, for sure. More space. I've got 64 gig worth of space here. Right? My first hard drive was 40 megabytes. Right? Now, glass surfaces. So here's one right here, right? Electrochromatic glass, touch interface, all right there in what appears to be and probably was just a regular little coffee table. Okay? Now this one, there's a lot going on here, so let's focus on just the screens. And what's interesting, of course, is the monitors were incredibly thin. Definitely something you would expect Apple to deliver for us. Okay? I can already see Phil Schiller up there on the screen. Let's turn it to the side and look at how thin it is. But as we look at these screens, right, we're seeing this user interface that is very busy, very feature-rich, lots of information. I do love that they've got YouTube on there. That was a good product placement. A little C-SPAN there. And what's interesting is you also have the stock market. And for UK, so I was watching the UK stock market. I thought that was interesting. And this is funny, if you really dig into it, the designers put a lot of effort into these things. There's 3 or 4 companies that work that have a lot of focus on FUI. And they do put a lot of effort into it. There's some interviews with some of the artists. In fact, there's the guy who's done a lot of the Iron Man stuff. You know, he talks about how he tries to obviously do what he's being hired to do, but whenever possible to add realism to it, to make it as real as possible what you want to see data-wise. No. Sorry. I've had it up. Now, you come over here and you take a look, and you see they basically just took plates of glass and did a projection on top of it. But as you saw later, he's able to use it for touch. Now here's this whole thing related to NUI. We're thinking about it's able to get information through the system and display it to him about how he's doing. Right? There's the big rumor mill about what Apple's going to do with their watch and with their wearable technology to be able to reach in and get health information. There's a whole sub-industry around health devices, Nike's got a Fitbit, etc. All trying to give you information about what's going on. Hopefully it won't be palladium poisoning, but you get the idea. Here's another one that's interesting. This one I find interesting because it seems very weird. The fact that I can see the back of the display. Right? I'm actually seeing what's behind it. And definitely, on one hand, it feels like a lot of artistic license. And then we have, let's take something as simple as a pair chart and make it look sexy, new, and fresh. Right? A little extra enhancement there, right? You see the switch, focus on what he's looked at. Lots of data, lots of dense information. And then here you see something interesting in that he's now taken the display. If you look at the one right here, okay, in that he's using it as a mirror to see what's going on. And if you watch the sequence in the movie, he actually touches it, right? So it's touch enabled. It has some type of camera device to focus and get information and then present it back to him. More just screen displays. And then of course we have this one over here. Once again, this one's a completely different type of experience in that it's just a wall monitor display. And look what they did. The interface is almost chunky, almost that it's got that kind of metro look to it. And if you think about why, right, that screen is probably a good 55, 60 inch type plasma LCD display. And so for the camera able to come through and actually see stuff, they had to make things incredibly large. Right? So here's a bit of artistic license taking just for the viewer that might not be a great experience if you really walk it through, or maybe it is. Square footage of this room, if you had something that's similar to Tony's work lab, maybe that works. And then we have the whole sequence where he goes through where Vanco calls in and wants to trace the call. This is where Jarvis brings up the Oracle Grid comment. And we'll plug into the Oracle Grid and we're going to find where this guy is. Once again, perfectly reasonable if you think about mixing maps, system data, and then at one point he even touches the screen down here to mute his voice talking, which is actually very interesting because that goes back to that whole mixing of gestures with a common system, right? In a lot of the whole sequences when he's in his lab, he's using voice and hand. It's all new. But occasionally he goes to the tactile response mechanism, right? Why? Because he's on the call, doesn't want the guy to hear him talking. Right, so he does that instead of issuing a command. And then he's got his other screen, which is when you think about secondary and tertiary displays that you might have at your work, where you put like Outlook, you keep your web browser. Once again, completely natural type of setup, which is, okay, give you a lot of data about what's going on. Rather than defensive piece, okay, sure. Once again, here's more detail about his heart. And you really think they went to a lot of effort to come up with what they thought would be interesting visuals for people to look at. Even for split seconds. Remember, I had to go through and take these out of the video for what they just, for split seconds, they invested tons of energy into. And of course, my favorite, the IP address one searching. Always got to have that. My favorite is how it's an IPv4, but then it's an IPv6 net segment. So I thought that was fun. Once again, the geek in me. So the question, are we there yet? Well, definitely, right? I mean, a lot of that stuff is very much there. Now, a lot of what we see is post-production CGI. In fact, some of it's just created in good old Adobe Flash. A couple of the companies that talk about it, the one for the New York Expo is a Flash app. Some of the stuff you see in his screen are done with Flash, right? They build up an animation and workflow, and then they play it, and it's recorded and rendered. Other stuff, the holographic stuff is much more complex, done with tools like Maya and other things. That said, I'm just consider all this good UI. It fits into the mindset of the character. He's very smart, very fast, give me lots of information. It reminds me of stock traders, right? People that work in the city in New York, right? They have those displays with dense bits of information, lots of numbers and graphs. If the data is specialized and your experiences with the data is specialized, you can handle more input, right? The average user watching them looking at Tony's screen or looking at a stock trader screen is generally being overwhelmed with information, right? And so it's all about context then, whether it's good or bad. To me, a lot of the UI is very busy, right? To the point of being over busy, right? Especially the animation stuff. Once again, side effect of the choice that was made for the user watching the movie, number one. So be careful when you see some of this stuff and go, oh, it looks cool, I want to build that. I'll step back and go, I want to build that exactly. Lots of translucency and stark colors, right? To the point of having the ability to look behind the monitor. Okay? Maybe knows what the best choice is. Once again, part of it's playing into the aesthetic of the actor, the scene. He sits in a dark room and watches the projection. I don't know if you noticed when they did the display, actually I might have another screenshot later, but when he's researching Banco, it actually says monitor 1 and 2, but it's like it's being projected in space. So there's some interesting things to try and get people to visualize what's going on, yet show something new and innovative. And then touch devices everywhere. I mean, the coffee table. What's that coffee table cost? Well, that takes me to a second video I want to play for you, and this is called A Day Made of Glass from Corning. Well, maybe my mouse will look at this. This one's fairly short. there's some really cool stuff there. And what's really impressive is a lot of what Corning shows there is real. Once again, artistic license to some degree. One of the key things is electrochromatic glass, also known as smart glass. Has anyone flown on the Boeing 787 Dreamliner? So I got to fly it last summer, and the glasses are electrochromatic. The windows are electrochromatic, right? They don't have windshields. You press a button, and it changes the translucency and the shading of the glass. There's a scene when the girl gets into the car and she presses on it and it goes darker. Same thing in her bedroom window. It gets lighter as the day opens. That's all real. The biggest thing you'll find with a lot of what's in that video is just cost of production to produce the glass in quantity to make it affordable, right? And this is what started. Corning really got a big boost when Apple used their glass in the original iPhone with what was Gorilla Glass. And they've had multiple iterations of that, and Corning is continuing to push the limits of what it can do. The dashboard is completely possible. Once again, it's a cost issue. We have this in the US, right? Ford has done some amazing things, and on the car they have some really high tech where, if you think about the electrical harness for some of their cars like the Ford Escape, it can be as much as a third of the car's expense is around the technology part, right? The problem with the Ford, though, is it has to hit a price point. Right? It's not in the same league as, say, a high-end Audi, right? Or a BMW, Mercedes, or anything even more higher-end, to make it justify the cost today, what it costs to make a glass dash, right? If you go inside, the Ford compared to, say, a BMW, you'll see real wood in BMW and plastic. You'll see these choices made cost, right? We're still at that point with a lot of it. Now, what's really cool is, I'll include this, like I said, the links that I'll put on my blog, is they actually have a follow-up video where they talk about what's possible. Corning gives you some data, so it's really was great. I really wondered how much was real. But notice the biggest difference between this and some of the stuff we saw from the Iron Man movie and the stills I showed in the previous section. Right? Notice the colors: bright, beautiful, rich, happy. Would be the way you would describe the feeling of those experiences. When the girls change the color of the dash to the pink and heart. On one hand, very, what should I say, stereotypical, right? That's a bad assumption that only girls like pink or whatever. The point I'm trying to make is not so much the choice of pink, but the choice of a color that brought happiness from the girls. That would definitely be my daughter. My son would, at this point, want black, and he'd want the Tony Stark Iron Man colors. But fundamentally, you get this idea of how the use of color can totally change the perception of that experience. Same thing when the mother wakes up and goes to her sink and is brushing her teeth. Right? The color choices used for the pattern are complete contrast to what we saw in Tony Stark's office. Same concept though, same user experience, just how it's presented to the user. So we have bendable glass, all this. And the key thing that Corning makes in their descriptive video where they talk about how they did things is that they need us. Right? Their claim to fame is making the glass, right? And making ways to interface technology to things. But it's up to us to build the systems that make them do things. Right? So we're getting back to a similar theme here when it comes to what experience is all about, what NUI is all about. And of course, when you think about it, Windows 8.x, iOS, Android all support touch, which is one of the key interface factors for that. And notice the difference there, right? In all those examples, there could have been a lot of different places where there was voice or other type of gestural interaction. Corning has a bias in that they're selling glass. They're selling the tactile touch experience. And in a lot of those situations, that may be the best thing. On the other hand, think about the guy's cooking. He has his hands full with the saucer and the whisk. Was touch the best mechanism to turn on the burner? Or would a voice command work just as well? So we gotta watch for bias, of course, in some of the solutions also. Okay. Now, holographic projection and gesture. This one's great, right? As he's walking, right, he has these projected in space pieces of his suits and stuff, and then he walks up to it and using a gesture says, okay, I want to basically get rid of this. I'm going to collapse. Well, perfectly possible, right? Tomorrow, when I show Connect, you'll see you have the ability to read the gesture. Once you track onto the item, or the person that's performing the gesture, it's all about deciding what to do at what point in the sequence. The hardest part of all this in this next couple screens is simply the production process, right? The technology to do this is coming or is there in different phases, but maybe not to the scale you see in the Iron Man's workshop. Right here, I love this. This is the one, I'm using the mouse so it's on the video, but if you look, right, this part where he does a basketball, he takes the trash, right, the device that he has now squished, he's added a game to his experience, right? I mean, I don't know if I get this through, you have a budgeting process to add a little throwaway that's a game, keeps score as I delete files. But you see the idea there, what's going on. Now here's the one I was mentioning earlier with the part where he's watching from his car. He's kind of doing the drive-in movie experience. Did you guys have the drive-in movie here in the UK? Did you guys do that? Not much? Okay. Definitely something that we did in the States. I remember doing it as a kid and be terrified when my parents took me to see Jaws. Well, they didn't take me, they took me, I was supposed to be sleepy. Forever terrified. But you see there's this kind of hanging in space that we have here with the displays, right? There's no obvious screen or something holding it up. And then we see here what I was mentioning earlier, monitor 1 and monitor 2. Okay? And we see all these different things. And this one doesn't get a lot of time in the movie, so you have to interpret maybe, how does he interact with this? Is it all him telling Jarvis what to do? Does he use gestures? Does he, do whatever? But I thought that was an interesting breakdown, and that the person who did the mock-up decided to put monitor up there so that you could actually tell which one it was. More detail here. Once again, very busy, but once again, Tony Stark's super smart. That means he can take in lots of data, right? He needs it fast and furious, right? So when we think about this, I don't know, right? Does this make sense for the average person reading it? Probably not, right? Once again, the periodic table, this time blown up life size as a way to visualize, okay, what's going on. Hand interaction. Once again, this part, this scene's actually one of the deleted scenes where he's taking that item and putting it in. So rather than going to a keyboard and saying, try this out, or even voice, he's using a gestural technique to do this. And this one was really neat, right? He tells Jarvis to go through and create a digital schematic for him that he can work with, right? Take this physical manifestation that his father used, right? And there's a nice contrast there between something out of the 50s, 60s that his father did, made out of, wood and paper mache and other things that you would make, like you're building a train set, to where Tony now makes it digital so that then he can go through and decompose it and break it into pieces. And then, of course, here he even flips it up, right? Something that's not reasonable with the physical that now you can do digitally. So, are we there yet? This is, a lot of artistic license by Hollywood, right? This is definitely in the category that you would have to be a billionaire to afford the type of technology today to do this. You're looking at holographic projection, multi-directional sound detection, right? As he walks around his lab, Jarvis hears everything he's saying, right? Once again, tomorrow I'll show you the Connect device, right? It has a way to figure out where the sound's coming, but only to a certain degree. Right? You walk up behind it, it's going to totally change its ability to capture that input. So think about his lab has to be totally wired in a special way to pick all this stuff up. And then multi-positional gesture detection, right? And he's doing anything and everything, and it's just all magically working, right? Not that it's impossible, but we're at the edge here, right? This is where really the limits of what we're able to do, at least in an affordable way, okay? But we're getting there, right? These cloud-backed agents, right? Those are happening. Connect for Windows is an affordable gesture recognition device. In fact, you can use more than one Connect at a time, and thus you start thinking, well, if I had 4 Connects in this room, and maybe they Connect 2s or Connect 3s that have a bigger range, right? Because if I had one over there that I'm pushing the distance mechanism, right? About midway to those guys are in the middle, is about as far as you want to be for it to recognize. So the difference between the Connect one that I'm going to show tomorrow and the new one, which is in pre-release, is that with the new one, I can detect up to 6 different people. Okay? So, this Connect for Windows, when it's coming in Project Natal, we're talking in 5-year span, we just totally changed the game, and the device that came for Windows in the US is about, I think, 250 US, I forgot what they paid. I had to pay for my developer kit, which is a little more, but it's gonna be in the couple $100 range. So even outfitting an entire room, right, let's say you need 10 of them. That's a few $1,000s. That's perfectly reasonable if you think about the type of environments where you might do that in, right? A manufacturing workshop. You're building, complex vehicles. You want to model things. You start thinking about the mathematics, and it's not so far-fetched. And then we're getting to the point, what about the ability to see what's there? It's one thing for it to see me. Well, what do I see it? Well, then you got to check this out, and this thing is totally cool. Discard. I don't want my ink. Let's try this again. It was a day that I knew how to use PowerPoint. Now this is a simple example, but you got to check out how real this looks. That's all holographic projection, that fire. And it might be a little hard to see on the screen here, so you'll watch it later. You'll see bits of smoke and like ash debris and floating in space. Now granted, this one's not, we're not there yet. It's not full room, right? This is localized. Localized to the container it's in, right? Because of the way they're having to do it. But notice the ambient room around. It's got lighting like this, right? You notice in the Iron Man room, one of the things about his space, a lot of it's darker, right? To get that contrast that you see, especially those colors they use, they chose those neons, those blues, and the high contrast colors to really show you the Iron Man suit and the things he projected. You start looking at this realistic looking fire. I mean, we couldn't even come close to this 10 years ago, right? You think about some of the 3D games. Look at your games. Look at Halo 1 versus Halo 4. I mean, the new Titanfall is amazing, the visualizations that we're getting. So now let's think that we can get realistic. Fire is one of the hardest things, right? Fire is super hard to get right. But if you can digitally synthesize fire, you can digitally synthesize wireframes, right? You start thinking about it. And there are, if you did, I did some research on the problem is I couldn't even come close to thinking about trying to budget for one and off-line budget. Accounting would forbid it in my life. But there are devices you can get these full room projectors that will project things into space. Okay? Doing Tony's lab, yes, a bit of work, but we're getting there. And I think this is just I think is amazing that we're getting there. So we're not there yet. We're not there yet, definitely to easily outfit our own labs. But we're getting there, at least halfway there on the gesture part. The projection with holograms, that's going to take a bit more. And I definitely think we're a bit off from the Star Trek fantasy of the holodeck. But we're getting there. We're definitely the TARDIS, right? We can go inside it. Oh, it's huge. So the last video I want to play you is Future Vision from Microsoft. They actually have a whole series. This is their the newest one they have. But they did one actually around different types of industries. Now, I'll email the links to these to find on YouTube. But there's one for retail, manufacturing, banking, etc. This one's showing a woman traveling to Johannesburg and then some other interactions. But it just shows you the art of the possible. What could we really do? Notice the transit. notice which group it came from the office team. Once again, bias and interpretation, not a lot of gesture, lots of touching. But one of the things we saw was taking a vision and building something from it. When you think about building these things yourself, right, you have to start through a multiple layer process. The key thing is that as we evolve through composition, maybe design Photoshop files, HTML, CSS, etc., then when we get to production, we don't have this, right? We really need to avoid a fun result like this. So it is going to take baby steps, right? You can't just mash on top NUI to an existing system. User experience starts at the beginning. It's something that's a part of the entire process, just like quality and testing should be from the beginning. It's more than just pretty UI, right? Way too often, I hear customers, I do a lot of work for Microsoft now, and still run into this occasionally, which is, well, go make it look pretty. And it's like, no, it doesn't get made pretty. We design it from there. We're designers that sit in this space all day long, and then we bring that together with engineering to develop the systems. And that brings me to the last part, which is thinking about how we build these full experiences. There's two things that have caught my attention the last couple of years that bring words to what we're trying to do. The first is this notion of a continuous client. A guy named Joshua Topolsky wrote a short article in Gadget, and once again, I'll post all the links for this. But basically, it's real simple. The ability to be working on one device and go to another device and be exactly where you left off. We're starting to see this. For example, I use a Twitter client that I just found addictive on my iPhone called Tweetbot. There's also one that runs on my Mac. So if I'm in OS 10, I can use it. I'm disappointed that I don't have one on Windows, because I spend most of my time in Windows. I have Illumia. I love this phone. It has a lot of great things, but I'm still fighting my memory, right? I'm old. I'm fighting that urge that I can't constantly switch and learn. So I use this for certain things, and I still use this for some day-to-day things because I have so much invested muscle memory. And I have a life acceptance factor here. Her phone is the iPhone. I have to make sure I know everything that hers does, so if there's an issue, I can deal with it, right? And that's a true reality. But when we think about it, right, we want to be able to place shift the computing experience. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, we start thinking about ubiquitous computing. And these quotes are from Bill Buxton. He's a designer at Microsoft Research. And he is really a leader in this space. And he talks about, when we think about ubiquitous computing and building these types of systems, every new product and service must provide great experience and excellent value. It works and it flows. Right, so this is kind of that baseline that we have to have. And then on top of this, we have to reduce complexity and increase the value of all the others. Things must work together. And he built this diagram where he talks about, when we think about technology, we want it to be seamless, and we want aggregation and disaggregation. And the story he tells about this is the experience you get with modern cars and your mobile, right? When you've paired your device, when you get in, magical things can happen, right? And one of the things that is you have this powerful computer in your hand, in your pocket. But when you get into the car, what happens? Well, it aggregates and becomes a part of the device experience that is your vehicle, right? Because now when you receive calls, you can answer it with the interface of your car, whether it's the steering wheel, touch on a screen, or even in some cars, voice. Right? You can say, do you want to answer this call? No, I don't want to answer. Go to voicemail. Okay? And so what's happening is, you're actually taking a device and making it a part of the system. But another thing that happens is we have augmentation and degradation. We think about augmentation, which is the ability for the phone to interact and be able to deal with phone calls just like it should. But we also have degradation, right? I can play Angry Birds on here. Should I be playing Angry Birds while I'm driving? Probably not, right? And so we start seeing that we have these connected systems, right? This continuous client experience. It's got to be contextually aware and seamlessly think between function and technology to where this ability to aggregate and augment and make things better. And also there's times when we're going to disaggregate, take things apart, and lose features. At the same time, just because we take things apart doesn't mean we lose features. In fact, when I take my phone out of the car, I can still be on a call 9 times out of 10. Occasionally it's not perfect. But to be able to stop the car, have it switch back here, or even switch from the Bluetooth in my car to my Bluetooth headset, right? Is we're basically take it apart from the system it's in and basically take away features but gain back features. And we start looking at this from taking away seeing these transitions into qualities that are seamless and graceful for the user, right? It's a natural experience. And we saw that in both the Corning video and the Microsoft video. And we saw some of the Iron Man video. We didn't see it as much, particularly because some of the holographic stuff, but it was there. It was this movement of data between systems. And you saw often in what a lot of us like to call the minority report gesture, right? Where the people are holding the tablets and they swipe between it, the data moves between it, right? This ability to take the information and have it be where we need it is what people want. And here's the great part. We can do all that. You don't even have to be a designer to do that. That's just all system stuff. And then layering the experience on top of it brings the entire, that great Iron Man FUI to reality. So the key takeaways I have for you is the future is now, right? We are in a perfect era. This week is unfortunately a complicated week in that not only is this a great show here, but Microsoft is doing Build. And if you're doing Microsoft technology, there's going to be a lot of announcements there. The good news is Microsoft put all the content online, and so you will be able to see it, and there'll be lots of new kits. I'm expecting them to announce some new stuff related to Kinect for Windows 2. But the bottom line is this is the new Kinect sensor that comes with the Xbox One is going to be available at some point to purchase, just like the previous edition. And they made an amazing set of enhancements to this device in what you can do. And the APIs are overall really straightforward. And like I said, I'll show you tomorrow with regular Kinect. But fundamentally, we can start building these things now, where appropriate, okay? That said, NUI doesn't always mean good user experience, right? Xbox One, I'll go back to it at the same time, has some issues, right? It's not perfect times. There's times where it's just bloody annoying. A good example is during the Super Bowl. We were watching this, have the Xbox sensor on the top of my television screen. And it decided to wake up because I was standing behind the TV. It recognized me. And so put a thing like, oh, do you want to do something? No, I want to watch the game. So I actually had to put something over the sensor. Right? Because I didn't want to stop the game to get into the system to tell it to leave me alone. And I wasn't really sure how to do it. Honestly, right, this is the hard part. The Xbox was no man. They expect it to be so easy that you'll just get it. And now my son has proved that in general is true. The old man here has some trouble with the technology that I even acquired. So it's not always there, right? And so we have to be prepared to degradate. We have to be prepared to provide good feedback. FUI can inspire. I love this. I came with this talk, I think, because I loved what I saw in movies. And I just picked Iron Man. Avatar's got some great stuff. If you want to just go through some of the great movies out there, there's some great stuff out there for experiences, and it's not all fantasy. But remember, the goal of the movies is to entertain you, and so there will be artistic license, both in experience as well as how it's presented. But the key thing, please, user experience is a core fundamental thing. Just as much as writing code, you've got to think about how the humans in meat space are going to interact with your system, right? So think about the primary device, but think about all devices, right? The data should be everywhere the user is and at the right point in time. The continuous client. If I pause where I'm reading, right? The Kindle will do that. You get it from Amazon. They do a great job of this. They will sync between devices. So when I switch from my phone because I'm reading while I'm in line to when I get to sit down with my Kindle Paperwhite, it goes right to the page I'm at. That brings me joy. It's happiness, right? And it makes sense, just like if I had a real book and I put a bookmark. The difference is now I have it in multiple places when I want it. Modern systems are connected and continuous. We have the power to do this, and if we add a good user experience on top of it, it is exactly what we want. It is that Hollywood experience. Are we there yet? I don't know. What do you guys think? Maybe. So thank you very much for coming. Hopefully you learned something and you're inspired to go out and build great systems. And if you're curious, tomorrow morning I'm doing a talk, part 2, where I'll show you how to program the Kinect to do voice, gesture, and other things, and we'll see if they'll actually listen to me. Thank you very much. If you need more information, contact me there. Thank you.